He stopped his car for a barefoot woman at midnight, and it changed everything. Ryan Blake, young, rich, engaged, had the world at his feet. But the woman he helped that night wasn't lost. She was hiding. And the closer he got, the more his world began to fall apart, piece by piece. Subscribe now and brace yourself, because what is buried in her silence could bring down an empire. The big shiny gates of Blake Towers opened wide. It was a very tall glass building in Ikoyi, Lagos. Ryan Blake walked out fast, angry, holding his car keys tight in his hand. Behind him, he could still hear his girlfriend shouting. Her voice was loud and angry. She was saying he made her feel bad in front of people. This was not the first time. Tonight was supposed to be nice. Just a dinner to help people, made by his father's company, Blake Global Holdings. The big room at Echo Hotel was full of rich people in pretty clothes. Everyone smiled and laughed, but then something bad happened. Ryan's girlfriend, Vanessa, shouted at a young girl who dropped a drink by mistake. The girl was just trying to help, but Vanessa got really mean. She said hurtful things, loudly. People looked. The girl cried. Ryan got upset. He spoke calmly, but he told Vanessa to stop, in front of everyone. Vanessa looked shocked. Ryan felt good for a second, but nobody else did anything. They just kept drinking and acting like nothing happened. Vanessa didn't care. His dad wouldn't care either. Christopher Blake, Ryan's dad, was a very rich man. He worked hard and built many companies in houses, oil, and computers. People either liked him a lot or were very scared of him. When Ryan was little, he watched his dad take over small businesses and make them his own. His dad always said, "Feelings make you weak. Winners don't say sorry." But Ryan was not like his dad. He was smart like him, but not mean. Ryan liked helping people. He gave money to young people who wanted to start businesses. He helped pay hospital bills. He liked to make life better for others. He didn't want to be the biggest boss in Lagos. He just wanted something real. Vanessa was pretty and fun at first, but now Ryan saw that she was not kind. She laughed at poor people. She made fun of people with strong accents. She looked nice, but her heart was not good. Tonight, something broke inside Ryan. He got into his big black car, a G-Wagon, and started driving. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove through the Lagos night, saw lights, food shops, yellow buses, and heard Afrobeat music in the air. He drove past Yeba, then to the island, into parts of Lagos rich people like him don't visit. Then, he saw her. A girl was sitting on the ground under a broken streetlight Novalende. She looked young and quiet. She had no shoes on. She hugged her knees. She looked small and sad. Her face was half covered, but Ryan could see she was very beautiful. Not like Vanessa. This girl had soft brown skin, curly hair, and eyes that looked tired and hurt. She looked like she had seen many bad things. Ryan stopped the car and walked slowly toward her. "Hi," he said softly. "Are you okay? This place is not safe. I can help you." The girl turned fast. Her eyes were sharp. "Go away," she said. Her voice was low and angry. "I don't want anything from you, especially not from someone like you." Ryan stopped. He didn't understand. He felt a little sad. "I just want to," he started to say, but she turned away like he wasn't there anymore. Ryan wanted to ask her name. He wanted to help, but her heart was closed. She didn't want him near, so he left. He got back in the car and drove away, but her face stayed in his mind. He knew he wouldn't forget her. Not tonight. Not ever. He went back to his luxury condo, but the silence felt heavier than ever. Vanessa had stormed out after their fight. The staff avoided eye contact. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't want to answer. Still, all he could think about was her, the girl under the streetlight, the one who rejected his help like his kindness was poison. It wasn't just her beauty that stayed with him. It was the sadness in her eyes, the kind that doesn't come from one bad night, but years of pain. And the way she said, "Someone like you," like his face reminded her of everything she'd lost. That night, he dreamed of her. She was falling into darkness and he couldn't reach her. A whole week passed. He tried to shake it off, went to meetings, smiled at cameras, dined with investors, but she was always there in his mind. Perhaps it was the way she had rejected his kind gesture. One evening, tired and running late for a business meeting, he stepped out of his car to grab water from a small local eatery nearby. And there she was, wearing a worn apron, mopping the floor slowly, quietly, like she was invisible. Her skin looked pale, her arms weak. She kept pausing as if standing was a battle. Ryan stood still. She hadn't seen him. She didn't even look up. She just kept walking, wiping tables, washing trays, stacking plates. She wasn't beautiful in the glamorous sense. She was real, fragile, human. And for some reason, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He didn't approach, just stood by the door and watched until she was done. Then, as the staff closed up, she picked up a small nylon bag and walked out into the street. Ryan hopped into his car and followed from a distance. She walked for 20 minutes through quiet back roads until she reached an uncompleted building, barely more than pillars and concrete. She slipped through a broken side wall and disappeared inside. Ryan moved closer, heart pounding. He parked his car and followed on foot. He looked inside. No light, just shadows. On the floor was a thin mat, an old pillow, a small water bottle, and some crackers. She lived here, alone. He couldn't hold back anymore. He stepped inside and called gently, "Hey, it's me. From the other night. Do you remember?" She turned sharply from the corner, shocked, silent, guided. "You followed me?" she asked, voice dry and thin. "I saw you at the canteen. I didn't plan this, I swear." He moved closer, his voice soft. "You shouldn't be here. This place isn't safe. It's not even livable." She looked away. "It's all I have." Ryan took off his coat and walked closer, kneeling beside her. "I don't know who hurt you, but you can't keep punishing yourself like this. You don't belong here." She stood slowly, as if about to push him away again, but she staggered. Her legs gave out. Ryan caught her just in time. She was burning with fever, shivering, her hands like ice, her body too light in his arms. "I'm not leaving you here," he whispered. She tried to fight, mumbling something weak and unclear, then passed out in his arms. He wrapped her tightly in his coat, lifted her gently, and carried her to his car. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what had happened to her. He didn't even know why he cared so much, but he was sure of one thing. He wasn't letting her disappear again. Eva stirred under a thick, warm blanket. Her head throbbed, her body still weak from fever. The smell of antiseptic and fresh linen filled the air. She blinked. The ceiling wasn't broken, no leaking roof, no wind biting through cracks. A nurse in white gently smiled at her. "You're awake. Just rest. You have had a high fever for days." Eva tried to sit up. Where am I?" "You are safe," the nurse said kindly. "Mr. Blake brought you here." Eva frowned, confused. "Mr. Blake?" Just then, The door opened softly, and Ryan stepped in. He looked tired but relieved. He held a small bowl of fruit and a bottled drink. Their eyes met, and hers immediately dropped. "You're awake," Ryan said gently. "I wasn't sure you'd even remember me." Eva looked away. "Why would you do this?" "You are sick, burning with fever. What was I supposed to do? Leave you there in that uncompleted building to die?" "I didn't ask for your help," she murmured. Ryan smiled sadly. "You didn't have to." She tried to sit up again but winced in pain. "Easy," he said, setting the bowl on the side table. "You've been through a lot. Just rest." The silence stretched. Ryan sat in the chair beside her bed. He didn't press her with questions. He didn't try to impress her. He just sat, calm and steady. After a moment, Eva whispered, "How long have I been here?" 3 days, he said. "You are unconscious the first 2. The nurse has been coming in round the clock. You are stable now. The fever is going down." She looked around. Everything was spotless. Soft lighting, clean clothes on a chair, a phone charger, even a book of poetry on the bedside table. "Why?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Ryan leaned back and exhaled. "I don't know. Maybe I'm tired of only helping people when it looks good on paper. Maybe I saw something in you I couldn't walk away from." She didn't respond. Her face was blank, but her fingers tightened on the sheet. "I'm not trying to save you," he added softly. I just wanted to make sure you are okay." She turned her head, staring out the window. The rain had stopped. A quiet hum of distant traffic filled the room. Lagos never really sleeps. Finally, she said, "My name is Eva." "Nice to meet you officially," Ryan smiled. She didn't smile back. Later that night, Ryan stepped out to take a call. His voice faded down the hallway. Eva sat up slowly, taking in the room once more. The bed, the food, the safety, it didn't feel real. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Her face was still pale, cheeks sunken, but the fever glow had left her eyes. Her fingers trembled as she touched the soft sweater she wore, not hers. Everything here wasn't hers. The next morning, she was sitting up when Ryan brought breakfast. She avoided his eyes but thanked him quietly. He noticed her voice was clearer today, still guarded but softer. "Eva," Ryan said, sitting opposite her, "I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm curious. Where are your parents?" She was quiet, too quiet. "Dead," she finally said, almost in a whisper. Even when they were alive, it didn't matter. The bitterness in her voice was sharp, too sharp for someone her age. Ryan's brow furrowed, but he didn't push. "I'm sorry," he said. Eva gave a small shrug, her eyes distant. He watched her. The way she held her spoon, her posture, the careful way she avoided crumbs. It didn't match the streets. She wasn't some common runaway. She spoke clearly, no slang, no broken speech. Educated, but something had broken her, and she refused to share it. The days passed slowly. She barely spoke, but she would hum sometimes when she thought no one was listening. Soft songs, almost lullabies. Ryan began spending more time in the apartment, bringing books, tea, or just sitting near her as he worked on his laptop. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them started feeling safe. Once she laughed at a joke he made under his breath, a light laugh, brief and surprised. Ryan looked up. "There's a smile." Eva immediately looked away, embarrassed. "You don't have to hide it," he said. "I'm not hiding, I just don't trust it." "Why not?" "Because things like this don't last." He couldn't help but wonder what she must have gone through to feel this way about life. One evening, she stood by the window looking out at the city skyline. Ryan joined her, his voice low. "You ever think about starting over?"
She didn't answer. Not escaping, but healing. Eva's hands gripped the window frame. You don't know what I've lost. Then tell me. She turned to face him, her eyes shining, but not from tears. I can't. You're not supposed to care about someone like me. Ryan took a step closer. Too late. Their eyes locked, long, quiet. But before anything else could be said, Eva turned away again. I should sleep. And just like that, the wall returned. Ryan nodded, but inside something had changed. She wasn't just a girl with no past. She was hiding it on purpose. And whatever it was, he was willing to wait and fight to know.
The more Ryan came around, the more his heart quietly leaned toward her. Eva softened little by little. He noticed the flicker of excitement in her eyes when he visited, the way she laughed softly at his jokes, the moment she allowed herself to linger near him. Evening walks through the quiet streets became their routine, a peaceful escape from his chaotic life of business meetings, luxury, and his demanding girlfriend. She was different, intelligent, witty, with a quiet strength beneath her guardedness. She stopped resisting his kindness, though she held tightly to the past she refused to share. Some things, she said once, are better left unspoken. Ryan never pushed. Being near her was enough. Then, one afternoon, when Ryan was away on a business trip, Vanessa stormed into the guest house. The door slammed so hard the walls shook. Eva was caught off guard, heart pounding. Vanessa's eyes blazed with anger. So this is where you hide, she spat. Eva rose cautiously. Please, ma'am, I don't want trouble. But Vanessa advanced, her voice icy and sharp. Trouble? You are a thief, a homewrecker trying to steal my man. Eva's throat tightened. I'm not trying to take anything from you. Vanessa sneered. Look at you, classless, homeless, desperate. What makes you think Ryan would ever take you seriously? You don't belong in his world. Eva felt the words hit her like stones. The humiliation crushed her, folding her into itself. She sank onto the couch, tears welling and spilling over as Vanessa's harsh gaze bore down on her. How could you come from nowhere to destroy a relationship I have built with Ryan for over 2 years? How can you live comfortably here, taking his whole attention like you deserve it? Vanessa asked with anger. Eva was broken by her words. Please, I do not have the intention of stealing anyone from you. Just shut your mouth and go back to the streets where you belong, Vanessa said and made to leave the building. Just then, Ryan returned. The door creaked open and he stopped in his tracks. There was Eva, broken and crying quietly on the couch. Vanessa stood near the door, arms crossed, triumphant. What's going on here? Ryan's voice was tense with confusion and anger. Vanessa turned with a smirk. Nothing you need to worry about, just clearing things up. Ryan knelt beside Eva, gently brushing her damp hair away from her tear-streaked face. Eva, talk to me. What happened? She swallowed hard, struggling to steady her voice. She said things, terrible things, about me. Ryan's eyes hardened as he looked at Vanessa. What did you say to her? Vanessa shrugged arrogantly. I told her the truth. She's a stranger trying to steal your attention, your life. I was protecting what's mine. That's cruelty, not protection, Ryan snapped. He turned back to Eva, heart aching. I'm sorry I wasn't here. Eva's eyes met his, haunted and exhausted. You don't have to protect me. But I want to, Ryan said firmly. She shook her head, voice trembling. Please, just let me go. I don't belong in your world. I don't want to hurt you. Just then, Ryan's phone rang. It was his father. He asked for his presence. Ryan looked at Eva. You don't have to say anything for now. I will go see my father, and when I come back, we will talk.
Ryan sat across from his father in the towering office overlooking Lagos. The city's dazzling lights blurred through the glass, but all Ryan could see was the hard set of his father's jaw and the cold, demanding glare fixed on him. Who is this Eva? And why are you risking everything, the family name, our legacy for some street girl? You barely know her. Ryan met his father's gaze steadily. She is not just anyone. I'm falling in love with her. And with Vanessa, I was never sure how I felt. His father's eyes narrowed. Eva, do you even know anything about her? Her background, her family? What if she's trouble? You're walking into darkness blindfolded. Ryan shook his head, frustration bubbling beneath his calm. No, I don't know much. That's why I need to find out. But this isn't about status or power. It's about how I feel. His father leaned forward, voice low and sharp. You don't understand the stakes. One wrong move and everything we've built comes crashing down. Ryan stood, voice firm. Maybe it's time things changed. I'm done living by your rules. His father's face darkened. Be careful, Ryan. This path will destroy you. Later that evening, Eva sat quietly in the guest house. Ryan watched her closely, noticing the exhaustion and restlessness in her eyes. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice low and hesitant. I can't stay here. It's not my home. I need to go back to where I've been living before. It's the only place I know. Ryan's heart tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. If that's what you want, I'll take you there. I can't keep you here if you don't want to stay. But I will ask you to give me a few days to sort some things out. I want to make sure that you are okay even if you don't want to stay here. She just nodded in agreement. Back in his sleek office, Ryan picked up the phone. I want a thorough, discreet background check on Eva. Why was she living in the uncompleted building? Who were her parents before they died? Everything you can find. Do not alert her. His assistant nodded, understood, sir. Days passed in a haze of meetings and restless nights. When the report finally came, Ryan sank into his chair, the pages trembling in his hands. Eva's family had once owned a thriving research firm, a respected beacon of innovation in Nigeria. Years ago, Ryan's father had led a ruthless acquisition that destroyed the company, bankrupting the Royce family. 2 months after losing everything, Eva's father took his own life. Her mother succumbed to mental illness, disappearing into a fog of grief. Eva, only 15 then, was sent to a group home and eventually vanished from the system, lost and forgotten. Ryan's bread caught. The truth slammed into him like a tidal wave. Eva hadn't rejected him that night out of fear or bitterness. She knew exactly who he was, the son of the man who destroyed her family. That night, Ryan sat alone in the dim light of the guest house. The weight of the truth pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. Love wasn't simple. It wasn't enough. It was only the start of a long, painful journey. The next morning, Ryan returned to the guest house. Eva sat quietly, staring out the window at the gray sky. I know about your family, he said gently, voice thick with regret. About what my father did. I'm so sorry. She didn't look at him, her silence louder than any words. You don't have to answer me now, Ryan continued, but I want to help. Not as his son, but as me. Slowly she turned to him. For the first time, her eyes softened and she began to sob. He was reminding her of a past she would rather not talk about. Vanessa wasn't used to losing, especially not to someone like Eva. The more Ryan drifted away, the more her resentment boiled. She could feel him slipping, not just emotionally but physically, avoiding her calls, brushing off meetings, and spending more time in that guest house than at his own estate. Determined to take back control, she did what she did best, used her resources. A discreet investigator was hired, and within days, the truth hit her like wildfire. Eva Royce. The name meant little until it was placed beside Ryan's family history. Her father was Daniel Royce, the owner of a small but promising research firm. Years ago, Ryan's father had orchestrated a brutal corporate acquisition that shut the company down. The scandal never made headlines, too well covered, but the fallout was real. Bankrupted and humiliated, Daniel Royce took his life 2 months later. His wife spiraled into madness. Their 15-year-old daughter vanished into a group home, forgotten. Until now. Vanessa stormed into Mr. Blake's office without warning, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. "She's not who you think she is," she said sharply, tossing the file on his desk. Mr. Blake raised an eyebrow as he flipped through the pages. The name Royce was enough to make his hands still. "She's his daughter," Vanessa continued, voice venomous, "and she's playing Ryan like a violin. Don't you see it? She's in his house, in his heart. She's getting close to destroy you." Mr. Blake's face was unreadable, too still, too silent. But Vanessa pushed further. "You need to leak this, expose her, frame it as a corporate threat. She's unstable, homeless, desperate. She's got nothing to lose." He didn't answer for a while. But behind his eyes, something cracked. Because Vanessa's words stirred guilt he had buried long ago. And now, the secret he had worked so hard to erase had returned, in the form of a woman his son might be falling in love with. A woman whose pain he created, and who, despite everything, had said nothing. Mr. Blake sat in his office, the walls once symbols of power now closing in on him like a trap. The name Royce echoed in his ears like a ghost dragging chains. He hadn't heard it in years, not since he buried the memory beneath layers of forged signatures, buried documents, and silent settlements. But now it was back. Eva Royce. The girl was alive, grown, and she was in his son's house, in his life. Panic clawed at him. He remembered the way her father had walked into that boardroom, desperate and humiliated, clutching the last of his dignity. Daniel Royce had begged for an extension, a merger, even a buyout under new terms. But Blake saw an opportunity. A vulnerable company, a man too hopeful to realize he was being played. And so he crushed him, fast, quiet, efficient, just as the shareholders expected. 2 months later, Daniel Royce was dead. And now his daughter had returned, not with threats or lawsuits, but silence. Dignified, wounded silence. He sat in his office pacing, every step heavier than the last. If this secret surfaced, if anyone found out how far he'd gone to destroy that man, it wouldn't just ruin him, it would unravel everything, the company's legacy, investor trust, his spotless public image. He'd built his empire on ruthlessness disguised as brilliance. And now that past was living under his son's roof, quietly tearing at the foundation of everything he built. He picked up his phone with a trembling hand. "She needs to go," he said coldly into the receiver. "I don't care how. Just get her out before Ryan finds out everything." But deep down, he knew it was too late. Ryan was already asking questions. And ghosts never stay buried for long. Haunted by what he had learned about Eva's past, Ryan couldn't let go of one question. How did someone like her end up living in an abandoned shell of a building? Driven by guilt and curiosity and not wanting to probe her further, he reached out to a former caseworker from Eva's childhood. The woman, now retired, met him in a quiet cafe, her eyes filled with a sadness that had never quite left. "She was one of the quiet ones," she said, stirring her tea slowly. "Never caused trouble, but after her parents, she just disappeared inside herself. Moved from home to home, too many to count. At 17, Eva had run away. No one came looking. She drifted through the cracks of the system, taking odd jobs in markets, cleaning shops, folding clothes in the back of laundromats, anything to stay invisible and survive. But the world was cold, and stability never lasted. Then she found it, the uncompleted building, tucked behind a wall of forgotten warehouses, overgrown and overlooked. It had no roof, no doors, just crumbling walls and silence. But to Eva, it was shelter, safety, solitude. It was near a church, too, the kind where the pastor left bread and water out back for anyone who needed it. Sometimes they gave her old clothes, a blanket, whispered prayers. So she stayed. She built a life from scraps, taught herself to sew, to read, to hope. But it was a quiet life, a hidden one. The building became her refuge and her prison, until Ryan saw her on that bridge, until her world changed.
After learning the painful truth about Eva's life following her parents' death, Ryan, burdened with guilt, made the difficult decision to pay Vanessa a visit. The tension was volcanic as Ryan stepped into the private lounge where Vanessa waited, arms folded, lips tight with satisfaction. She'd expected him to come running. But his face was stone. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, voice low but laced with fury. Digging into Eva's cast, threatening her, leaking lies. "She's not who you think she is," Vanessa snapped. "She's using you, Ryan. Don't be naive." He shook his head slowly. "No, you don't love me. You love control. You love what I represent." Vanessa's smugness cracked. "I'm not marrying you," he said coldly, his voice final. "Not now. Not ever." She blinked, as if she hadn't heard might. "You're throwing everything away for her? A girl who's beneath you? Who lied to you? Do you have any idea what this will do to your reputation, your family?" He stepped forward, calm and deadly clear. "Then let it. I'd rather be hated for the truth than chained to a lie." Vanessa's pride shattered in silence. She stormed past him, heels clicking like gunshots, slamming the door behind her, humiliated, angry, and already plotting her next move. The grand estate loomed in silence as Ryan stepped into his father's private study, a leather-bound folder clutched in his hand. Mr. Blake looked up. From his glass of aged scotch, brows raised, surprised but not unprepared. Ryan placed the folder on the desk and opened it with precision. "These are the records, the real ones. Dated acquisitions, forged signatures, payments to government auditors, testimonies from former employees. It's all here." Mr. Blake scanned a few pages, his jaw tightening. "This was business, Ryan. The Royces were going under. I did what I had to do to protect our interests." Ryan's voice was sharp, steady. "You didn't just bankrupt her father. You killed him. You stripped away everything he built, left his wife broken, and turned her daughter into a ghost just to get ahead." "You don't understand what it takes to build an empire," Mr. Blake shot back. "No, you don't understand what it costs." He leant forward, eyes locked. "You're going to issue a public statement. Admit what you did, restore the Royce name, and hand Eva full rights to the patent her father developed, the one you built half your empire on." Mr. Blake's face went pale. "And if I don't?" He didn't flinch. "Then I go public. Every lie, every bribe, every piece of paper. I'll burn your name down to ash if it means she gets justice." His father stared at him in disbelief, then whispered, "You'd destroy your own blood?" Ryan turned toward the door, voice hollow with hurt. "No, Dad, you already did." Ryan arrives at the guest house where Eva is staying, a modest, warm space that finally gives her a taste of peace. He finds her sitting by the window, watching the wind stir the trees in silence. Without hesitation, he walks up to her, takes her hand and says softly, "You're never going back to that uncompleted building, not while I'm breathing." Eva looks at him, shaken and confused. Ryan, what are you talking about? He sits beside her and explains everything. How he confronted Vanessa after discovering her betrayal. How he ended the engagement without a second thought. He tells her about confronting his father, showing him all the evidence of what was done to the Royce family. The forged acquisition, the bribes, the destroyed reputation. He gave his father an ultimatum: make it right or face public exposure. Eva's eyes fill with tears as he speaks. She shakes her head slowly. You didn't have to do all that. I never wanted this to be a war. I just wanted to live quietly, to be left alone. Ryan reaches out and cups her face gently. You never asked for any of this. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve justice. We're not hiding, Eva. We're restoring your father's name. Your family deserves peace, the real kind, not silence born of fear. The next morning, the world watches as Mr. Blake, once the untouchable titan of industry, holds a live press conference. He publicly admits to unethical practices during the acquisition of the Royce. He doesn't mention Eva by name, but he issues a heartfelt apology and announces the immediate restoration of the full rights to the original patent created by Eva's late father. He even calls it a gift back to the rightful hands. Eva watches the broadcast from the guest house trembling. Moments later, Ryan escorts her to Blake Enterprises headquarters, where Mr. Blake waits. She steps into the room, face pale, emotions storming beneath the surface. Mr. Blake looks at her, guilt weighing heavily on his shoulders. I can't undo the past, he says quietly, but I hope this is a start. Eva, overcome, doesn't speak for several seconds. Then, without a word, she steps forward and hugs him. It's not forgiveness wrapped in words. It's healing through action. Mr. Blake's eyes mist as he hugs her back. Later that evening, in a quiet garden lit by string lights, Ryan takes Eva's hand again. I fought for you, Eva. Not just because of what happened, but because I love you. And I want to spend my life making up for the years you lost, not with pity, but with partnership. He kneels, pulling out a simple but elegant ring. Will you marry me? Eva, speechless, nods through tears. Yes, she whispers, her voice trembling with emotion. As they embrace, the camera slowly pulls back, capturing a love not born from rescue, but from recognition, redemption, and the power of choosing each other despite the weight of the past.